Right. We'll have a coughing chorus in a minute. Don't know very well. And it's lovely to see so many officers with us here tonight, and I must especially welcome tonight Andy, who's going to be our new head of housing. And you've come to serve us tonight instead, so I'm sure we'll all be on our best behaviour. Hope things don't go wrong. So I'll just read the general announcements, which, as you know, I usually miss, so I'll try and behave tonight. We're not expecting the fire alarm, so we're all aware where those entrances are, aren't we? No, I haven't got there yet. Thanks, Jenny. Mobile phones, can we make sure they're all on silent or switched off? And we haven't got any members of the public, so I don't need to say that about recording. And you all know how to speak into the microphone, and you don't need your delegate's card. And I always say go and get some members' post, because it's exciting. You find 2-year-old troves and all sorts of things in the cupboard if you look hard enough. So on we go from there. So we're on to apologies now, Jen. Jessie, and we've got one. She's not well, so sorry to hear that. Awful time of year, isn't it? And we've got one from Steve Hind, who's got COVID again. Yeah, apparently. Any more apologies? No. Okay. So any declarations of interest? No, we're all okay with that. So shall we move on to the minutes? From last time, from the 6th of December, for Christmas. Is everybody happy with the minutes? And if they are, can somebody propose them? Yeah, thank you. And that's in many places, unseconded. So shall we all vote for that? Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. So there's no public questions and there's no members' questions. So we'll move on to item number 6, which is the Local Authority Housing Fund bid, which I hope you all know about now. And we've got Pippa Stroud here, our Head of Strategic Housing Services, to present the report. Pippa.
Thank you, Chair. But I start also with thanks for accepting this item onto the agenda when I know it wasn't on the work plan for the committee, but members will be aware from the report in front of them that this is a very new opportunity that came up just before Christmas. The government does like to do that to us sometimes, but it was important that we took advantage of this this committee to have a decision about whether we should go for a bid to the fund. In short, the government let us know that it has pre-allocated us some £1.8 million worth of funding, and with which to purchase a total of 15 properties, specifically for people fleeing conflict, specifically for people fleeing conflicts in Afghanistan and the Ukraine. So it's quite closely ring-fenced, this fund, from that point of view. It means, in short, that we will have to put match funding to that. So our allocation from the government is 1.8 million, and the match funding that we'll have to find is in the region of 2.2 million. My finance colleagues tell us that that is doable in terms of the rental income, which would then pay back the funding that we would need to find to match fund it. And I think the important thing to note here is that the intention is that these 15 properties become a long-term legacy addition to our general needs housing stock, so that once the refugee crisis has passed, the properties would be available to households from our waiting list or households who are facing homelessness. That's probably all I can really say at this point. It's a bit of a moving picture. We're getting more information and guidance as time goes on, but I will do my best to answer any questions. If I can't answer them tonight, then I will come back to committee as soon as I have the response from government. Thank you.
Lorraine. questions before I make the proposal. Okay. Yes, Jenny.
Will be able to afford from rental income. Would that be social rent or would that be affordable rent?
Thank you. Good question. It will need to be affordable rent. My finance colleagues told me that it would not be able to stack up with social rent, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got as far as identifying any properties yet? Just even looking at the moment.
Good question. We have had a little look at the market, or I should say my property services colleagues who are the experts in this have had a look at the market, also keeping an eye on opportunities to buy back, right to buy properties that are offered back to us. So there are a few prospects in the market. However, we didn't want to make any financial commitments until such time as we know we have the approval of this committee and that we are likely to be successful in a bid.
Thank you. So obviously, if this all goes through, have you already, say, got 5 or 10 that you can kind of go, right, let's go a little bit further into this then? Is a few things that sort of in the pipeline that you can kind of try to act on as quickly as possible, yeah?
Yes, I would say less than 5. But the search has already begun to see what is on the market and what we could likely buy with the funds.
I think possibly to add to that, Lindsay, you probably know we do buy houses sort of off the shelf, don't we, with the right to buy money because we can't really keep up with the new building in some ways, rather than send the money back. We've done that, so they're pretty experienced at that now, I think, aren't they? What are we calling them now?
I think they're property services.
Property services team.
But they are
changed their names. Yes. Yeah. Does that help? Thank you.
I was just wondering, I mean, I know that you can buy properties off the peg and whatnot, so this could be up and running quite quickly, bearing that in mind. Are you able to move people who are Ukrainian or Afghanistan, wasn't it? Refugees which are already in the district in temporary accommodation into this accommodation?
Absolutely, yes. We don't have any in temporary accommodation at this point in time, but of course we're always aware that that could change at any point.
Brilliant.
Ooh. Right, just broadcasting to the nation. I know the press. I have to tell you, the press have picked this up already. And I've been on Radio Gloucestershire, trying not to say too much really, because they do tend to push you to say things that you don't really want to say, and I had to keep saying we're right at the beginning of this process. You know, we've shown an interest, and like Pippa's reminded us, the government grants always come in at speed, and we have to get on and do something quite quickly. But this seemed to us a no-brainer, especially once finance and gave their approval that it could work. Shall we come? Anyway, if there's any more questions, you want to make a proposal? Propose approval. Sorry, you want to propose? Don't we approve? You want to propose them? I know. That's you asked me, so okay. I have no questions. I don't need to debate, so I just wanted to thank you. So Lorraine is proposing. So if I read out the decision, the committee resolves to approve the submission of a capital bid to DLUHC for the purchase of accommodation to be held within the HRA. Lorraine has proposed. Would anyone like to second it? In a number of places. Thank you. Any debate on this? Thank you, Lindsay. Steve.
To be honest, I just wanted to say I think this is a really good thing, and I'm glad actually that the government is providing funding to support the the Ukrainian and Afghan resettlement scheme. So this is definitely something that I will be supporting, and I do actually hope everybody else does. So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Thank you. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to hear this this opportunity to address the need. Migration, whether it's war, conflict, or economic, or forced migration, is of course a perennial issue. It's nothing new. I'm a grandson of a migrant refugee, married to a granddaughter of a refugee, formerly married to a descendant of a slave. This is we're all, it's probably appropriate to say, migrants and refugees. How we respond to this issue is, of course, entirely down to our values. I find myself in this strange position where, in the context of response to the phenomenon of migration, our national government have acted in a way that I find in degrees abhorrent to at least mildly intolerable. But actually, since this is entirely consistent with my values and the values of the Alliance, I find myself completely supporting this motion and will be voting for it, and I recommend others too.
I'd just like to say well done everybody here for picking up on this so quickly and making it in a state where we can actually discuss it in late January if you only just got it before Christmas. Well done.
I should be supporting this, and I was particularly glad when I read that families from Afghanistan were going to be considered, because they seem to have gone below the bar, and people have been talking about Ukraine, and that's what's been on the news a lot. But a lot of families from Afghanistan have been here longer and in hotels and forgotten about something, and this hopefully will address the issue for a few families. I'm assuming we'll go for our own council stock first before buying off the peg, because at least we know, usually we know those houses and we know the condition of them. And also when we need to do repairs or whatever, they're often near other of our homes, which makes it more efficient. So I thank the officers for getting off the ground, because I mean it would have been very easy to get back from Christmas holidays and take a few weeks to get going again. So, or at least it would have been if it'd been me. So thanks very much for jumping on it quick, because I know government grants quite often come along and you have to move very quickly or lose them. And thank you very much for getting on with this. And I hope it does go through.
Anyone else? No, you can just join in and say how pleased we are that this is happening, and of course the bonus is that it'll be legacy for the Stroud district, so that's more properties that are coming into our ownership, isn't it? So, and I think it's fortunate that we still have our housing stock, that we are able to do this, and as I've said many times, when the Ukrainian crisis started, the people of Stroud seemed to open their hearts and homes to people, didn't they? And when they came in. Now, taking up Jenny's point about the Afghanistans, I do hope they haven't been forgotten. But I do think they do need larger properties, and we've got that in hand as well. Anyway, yeah. So thank you everybody for a very, very positive debate here tonight. I don't detect any dissent, so thank you for that. We're seconded in many places, so if anybody else wants to say anything to sum up, please do. No? Do you want to say anything, Lorraine? I know you struggle to say something. No? Chris?
Oh, I'm so...
I read the report. I agree with it. So I don't see any need to go any further.
It's not often Lorraine is lost for words, is it? And I'm really sorry about this, but we know your heart's in this, isn't it?
Drag it out a bit further if you want to, but I don't see the need.
Hope you all got that. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Shall we vote on that then? Is everyone in favour? Thank you very much indeed. I don't know, I didn't invite you to say anything, and you know you could have said anything, couldn't you? And I think the thing to emphasise is this is extra housing. This isn't instead of, this is extra housing. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Because we've had to move back two of the items, one was the independent living or the older people's, wasn't it? And the other one was the voids properties. We've moved that back to March, so March is going to be a fairly busy meeting, but we've still got some stuff to do because you have got some out of hours, some information sheets. One of them was the out of hours service provision, which came out as a very late paper. I believe there's some hard copies at the back. Are there not? Yeah. So I hope you've all had a chance to read it. Yeah. Has everybody seen it? Have you seen it? They did come out quite late on Friday, I think. Yeah. Are there, Helen's here for that. So are there any questions for Helen?
Thank you. I'm really quite glad to see with the out of hours service issues that it has been identified as a service failure. I'm not going to go on about this, but are we going to look at maybe bringing this service in-house, as we have had this issue a couple of times now? Is that something that we can look into?
Options can always be looked into. What I would warn, though, is that to provide that sort of cover would be many, many, many times the cost to the council of the cost of outsourcing it to Orbis or any other contractor. And obviously, you know, we recognise that it was a service failure for us and for all of Orbis's other customers, because everybody experienced the same issues. And I think the graph is quite eloquent, isn't it, at the absolutely exceptional peak demand on that one particular day. And all across the country, every landlord had problems with out of hours services. Every firm that had those sort of services couldn't cope. In extreme weather conditions, it happens. And obviously we've learnt some things from this, and you know, you learn from every difficult circumstance. It took some digging to get some of the figures, but I thought it was quite interesting that, you know, one person accounted for 10% of all the calls made on the day. So the initial figures looked really scary, and actually they became a bit more, oh well, that's a bit more reasonable as we drilled down and got more information. But Orbis did have extra staff on duty and on standby, but on the day they said that they would have needed, for their whole operation, they would have needed an extra 600 staff to be able to cope with the volume of calls. And, you know, in an extreme weather event or, you know, a type of civil emergency, out of hours, unfortunately, you can't possibly put in line capacity to deal with a one in several years event for every night of the year.
You said that there was one instance where 10 calls were made by the same person. I mean,
one person made about
sorry,
100
yeah,
calls,
yeah.
yes.
That would say to me then that, you know, obviously somebody's desperate, that they require help, and if they have had to call 10 times, that's not good enough. I know you're obviously saying that this is something that is happening, you know, once in a couple of years, but I think we're actually finding this is happening more often than we think. You know, these freak weather, you know, everyone will say it's climate change and everything else. So we need to be mindful of the fact that this might be happening more often. And therefore, I think we just need to be prepared a little bit more, because to me, it's not really good enough to just say, oh, it's just a once in a couple of year event. If these are happening more often, which I think we can all say that we know that these weather conditions are happening more and more often, I think we need to take it a little bit more seriously.
Yes, I agree with you, and I would respond in two ways to that. One is that the standby arrangements we put in place for the Christmas period, which in the event weren't required, but having set up that system in future, if we know that there's going to be an extreme weather event, you know, we would be able to, you know, put that in place as a supplement rather than a, you know, we don't want to be, you know, having a dog and barking ourselves and duplicating everything. But if we know that there's a likely event, you know, I remember, you know, I'm sure many of us here remember the 1987 hurricane that wasn't going to happen and came out of a clear blue sky. I worked in a local authority there, and every surveyor was being rung up at 2 o'clock in the morning to come out and assess buildings for safety. So, you know, we've got that backup arrangement, which I think is, you know, gives us some comfort. And the other thing that we have progressed as a result of the experience on the 17th was that what we've asked Orbis to do is if they're realizing that they're becoming, you know, too busy and customers are waiting too long, what we've asked them to do is alter their answer message to say, we're experiencing really, really high demand. You can email us on this email and we will get back to you, and you can text us on this. So give people alternative channels so that rather than hanging on the phone, they can get through. It's a simple thing that should make a difference.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lindsay. I think we have learned from the experience, especially going to audit committee and looking at it fair and square. And I think the things that were put into place over the Christmas period were more than adequate. In fact, they weren't used at all, were they?
No, they weren't.
But you know, that's in place now, and I was really happy to know that the volunteers who were on duty were experienced housing volunteers, because they would know exactly what to do. And you know, we have got some really really excellent staff here, as you know. So I think I think we have learned from it. I think what we must perhaps also learn to do, and I may be a bit out of place saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, you know, so tenants phone up at 11:45 to say their outside tap isn't working. You know, that must be part of the picture as well. And I'm not saying they do that on the coldest night of the year, but, you know, these things do happen. So, and we're working on that, aren't we, Becky? We're working on these videos. We're doing a big comms on it. So I think we could all help with that. Yeah. Lorraine, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Will it be better if I stand up so you can see what? Okay. I missed the last meeting, as you know, where I would have spoken about the out of hours thing. My point then was I had to contact officers on a Saturday. Now, this is before the 6th of December because the meeting was after that. I had to contact them. Somebody contacted you, Helen, didn't they? Now, what I discovered at the time was there was no message. There's a difference between the phone being a call being picked up and being answered. There was no message saying you are in a queue. And if you have a mobile phone, if you have
your thanks were passed on at the last meeting, I can assure you, and I think it's minuted.
I would like to make you aware that the amount of work that was done in the week between this event and Christmas was absolutely phenomenal. And in particular, Martin in IT was, doing all sorts of highly complicated techie stuff to, make sure that we would be able to do stuff. And this Shellam, as well as officers within housing, worked really, really hard to get things in place. And at the event itself, we know that it wasn't satisfactory with the contact, but both our out of hours contractors and property care staff really did, pull out all the stops. We had 4 people actually on call from the council, and the contractors had theirs, but a lot more people than that, gave up their weekend and spent very long hours in impossible road conditions, trying to get out to people, delivering heaters and going out to doing repairs. And that was real dedication, and really shows the values of our staff, that they put our customers first and their own weekend and their family time second. So we are really grateful to the effort that people put in.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. I think that actually, thank you. Oh, fine. Thank you, Helen. What I would applaud is that clearly, once the full extent of the problem emerged, it seems clearly that there was really proportionate, rapid response, and similarly a really thorough and timely review, which I think is going on. So I'll be interested to see kind of the full output from that, and so what other changes will be made. Picking up Lindsay's point, I think yes, it is climate change related. Times are quite chaotic, kind of government infrastructure and decaying at that. That means that there will be extreme weather events and other extreme events that are going to challenge our civil kind of, our structures, our infrastructures. And so we need to shift to a new mode, think about them. And in my domain, we model failure quite extensively and in detail. And I think we need to adopt some of those methods. Imagine worst case scenarios as being normal, not an extreme. That is what we have to look forward to, I think. The second thing I think is that these things tend to challenge a centralized approach. So obviously, Stratford Council is the district authority, but I think that as with COVID and other crises that are upon us, the value, not just the value, the essential value of community level responses, to maintain resilience to these challenges and then making emergency responses, because they can walk to the next road. They don't need a car. They can go and see their neighbour. They can be in communication with the council and they can make responses, very rapidly. And I think also just that scale we're talking about. Yeah, there are 600 people in the diversity of communities who are ready to help, and they can help, and they will, and they want to, and they recognise they need to. So just urge us to consider that resource that we've got, not just as an option, but as an essential part of our future response to these inevitable extreme events.
Absolutely, I agree that is a good way forward. And the other thing that we will need to be considering looking to the future is that we need to be clearer as a local authority and have information for our residents about what residents can and can't expect from the out of hours service. Because as Matty said, some people will ring up just to report a routine repair because they're awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, they may be a shift worker or whatever, and that's fine, but in the middle of a big emergency it might not be the best thing to do. And we need to be clear which situations the council can mitigate and is responsible for responding to, and which things actually are not the council, and people need to be, looking to other community resources or other emergency services. The council is not an emergency service, and we do our best in Stroud to meet our residents' needs, which sometimes means that people think, well, if I've got a problem, the council will sort it. And making sure that we're clear about what we can do and what we can't do and where else people can go. And a lot of work, as you say, has been done about that as part of the pandemic and as other forms of planning. So I think, again, that would be helpful so that people are clear on the parameters of what we can do, because sometimes people are frustrated because what they expect us to do is just either physically impossible or utterly unrealistic, and we need to be clear about that, because otherwise we're causing frustration by raising expectations we can't meet. So I think it's always helpful to have good information. At the moment, the service tends to try to be all things to all people, and that's not realistic.
I would really like to support Councillor Jokl in his, where as a council, health and well-being is big in our plan. And I think enabling the community to step in on a local level, one way or another, I think is very important. But for me, a key thing there is that it needs a framework and it needs information. And I think what certainly the crisis showed was not enough information was getting through to the tenants. Yeah, where the answer phone messages, it wasn't an answer phone message, and so much more. We all know now how long we can be in a queue at times for various firms or departments, and there's a wide variety of messages that one can hear. Both sometimes they're a bit more relaxing. Sometimes you can give, you've got 5 waiting in front of you. Sometimes you hear, well, due to high demand, can you try late in the day, whatever. But I think we need to look at that really. And when there is a crisis, and I would say also with Councillor Jokl, it is possibly the new normal. We will get another crisis. So we need to work on that information giving and empowering of the local localities. That's very important.
I'll just add to that too, because I think that what you've said is very relevant. When I phone my GP now, the first thing, you get a recorded message, you don't talk to voice. It's a voice, it's Lisa, but she says straight away, if you're ill, if you're very ill, phone 999 or 111. Just don't bother us. You sort of get this feeling, well, should I be doing this? Should I really be ringing this very busy GP?
Just following on from Lucas, I do think, and also Chris, I think we've got so many hubs, so many parish councils that would actually probably more than happy to help have volunteers, in instances like this, where it may be a town or parish council has a small stock of these heaters and things like that then they can be distributed locally without lots of council staff having to need to be on call and things like that. I think, like I said before, I do think, and Chris also said this, that, we do need to almost treat these extreme weather events as the new normal. But I must admit, I'm not so keen on putting all of the onus onto our tenants, because the ones that I came across at this time were very genuine people, were elderly people, and I think, whilst we can to a point, I think we also have to be mindful that, as landlords, we have a duty of care to these people as well. So whilst I agree with most of what has been said, I don't think it is fair to put all of it onto our tenants.
I would never suggest that, and if I gave that impression, I'm sorry, because of course, you know, we're here for our vulnerable tenants, and you know, staff did go out and work extremely long hours doing exactly that. So yes, you know, I completely agree.
We've discussed in the past, haven't we? And I know you saw you shaking, you know, nodding your head about communication, didn't we? And information. I think that's the key. That it's giving people the information.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask actually. So I know, going from what Lindsay was saying, there are obviously genuine people, but then there's the people that will ring up. How are you going to communicate that to the tenants so that you know that everyone is on the same page?
Well, we have a tenant handbook which gives information about tenancy and responsibilities and rights and responsibilities, so we can have information in the handbook. There are times when we know that something could be coming up, when we can send out an SMS message or an email to all of our tenants whose contact details we have, which is the vast majority of them, to warn them about something that could be coming up. We have, since this event, we have made information about various subjects more prominent on our website and directed people to that, because there are, in terms of the freezing of condensate pipes, quite a lot of people can actually resolve that themselves if they know what to do. And as a standard thing during the day, you know, in cold weather, property care will quite often talk people through what you need to do is X, Y, and Z, and the tenant can actually solve it in, you know, during the course of a phone call, which is a wonderful result. But obviously, if the tenant is not able to do that, of course we would visit. But information about that sort of thing is on the website, and we are making it more prominent of what people can do to help themselves if they're able to.
I was just going to say as well that maybe people need to be reminded that the handbook's online, because I haven't looked at my one for a little while, but obviously there's things in there that I think people need to be reminded that it is regularly updated,
Yeah.
so that they're not just looking at an old version that they've got.
Absolutely, and we can also use the keynotes paper to, you know, to put out articles, and that's something we do regularly. So and obviously we have our involved tenants, and we're always willing to listen to ideas about how we disseminate information more effectively. Thank you.
Sorry, just quickly, with the older people or people that don't use the internet, that they're not going to have access to it, could we give them like an information sheet or something with that information on how to, with the boiler situation?
Yes, of course we can do. We have, I think the vast majority of our tenants will have a phone, and we can communicate with them by phone. But yes, we are open to a range of communications, and you know, I can't emphasize strongly enough that where we have vulnerable residents, we would always be prioritizing them for individual visits.
Just my mother-in-law is quite old, and she wouldn't understand how to use a computer, but not necessarily ring you either.
Yeah.
So it could just be something, just looking at
Yes.
information leaflet that might be quite helpful for older residents or vulnerable ones.
Yes. Our job is very much to make sure that we communicate with people in the way that suits them.
Brilliant.
Some very good points made there. I think that's firstly to take back, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. Mike.
Just a sort of question, you know, the extra cover arrangements we did over Christmas, is that something we're going to be implementing a bit like when they send the gritters out when there's any danger of frost? Is that something that's going to be more standard implemented rather than just thinking, oh, we've had a bad event, we're going to now implement it for the next one if it comes along like Christmas? Is it going to be sort of more?
Sorry, it would be an option we can draw on if we think that there's going to be an extreme event that would cause an overwhelming of services. And the other thing that that we've put in that would help us to respond better is that the previous to the December event, the procedure from Orbis was if they were becoming overwhelmed, they sent an email. Now we have on-call duty managers, but they're not necessarily plugged in. In fact, the officer concerned that weekend was on her computer and did see it, but wasn't in a position to be able to jump in and do much about it at the time. But we have changed that to asking them to actively come to us if they meet certain thresholds of length of wait or number of calls or being missed, so that we know what's happening and we can start trying to see what else we can do to support. So
my question also is, when we're looking more at extreme events, should we also be proactive? Now, I don't know what the personnel implications of that are, but for example, people with heat pumps, that they get a message, don't switch your heat pump off. Yeah? Would that be something that is feasible?
I can certainly look at that.
Yeah, and the same with people with condensate pipes. You will now enter a few days where your pipe might freeze up. So if people are prepared and they know they're all together in this having to do it, then it's not such a shock.
Yes. Yes, we will certainly look at trying to be more proactive in giving people information in advance. I think part of the complication of that particular weekend was that there was a very sudden drop in temperature to a very low level, followed by a very rapid thaw. And the combination of snow, black ice and burst pipes was just really toxic for everybody.
Well, thank you. I think we've done that. Justice, haven't we? And thank you for that. Thank you for that information sheet. And we'll go on to the next one, which is equally gritty. It's tackling damp and mould, which it sounds like we're doing this on a new subject, and we're not. We're halfway through a process that we started some years ago. I feel I have to say. So we're on to Helen again. And I hope this was circulated earlier on, wasn't it? This did go out with the council papers.
Yes, I hope you've had time to read it. I mean, obviously, this is a very topical issue at the moment with the coroner's report from last November, and also last year's ITV investigation into predominantly London social landlords and poor conditions, which has, given the whole social housing sector rather a bad name, which has been difficult. But obviously, the very tragic death of the toddler brought this to centre stage and has really alarmed a lot of people. And the government, Michael Gove, has been very vocal in criticising individual social landlords where he feels they haven't done enough. The social housing regulator has been setting new standards, and the housing ombudsman has been contacting and starting to do things. So there is a lot of attention going on this across the board, not just in council housing, but in the private rented sector as well. And so we're doing a number of things to try and respond. Unfortunately, at the moment, we've got the perfect storm where there's concern about damp and mould, quite rightly, because mould spores are injurious to health. But the coincidence of this at a time when there's a cost of living crisis, with fuel bills being particularly difficult for people to meet, a lot of residents, tenants, homeowners, almost everybody is very conscious of their heating bills now and putting on their heating less. Some of our tenants can't afford to heat their homes to a reasonable comfort level, and that unfortunately will contribute to condensation and mould, and it's a real dilemma for many of our residents who are facing budgetary problems. What we're doing to address the issues that we have, although obviously this is a very topical issue and a lot of people are concerned about it, it's not something that affects a lot of council properties, yes, some properties have problems, but the majority of our properties don't experience problems with damp and mould. That's not to say it doesn't really worry people who are experiencing it. What we're looking at is revising our damp and mould policy and procedure. And we're at the same time looking at, is there more we can do when properties avoid, to do more testing and proactive works to prevent problems arising once a new tenant has moved in. We have a small working group that had its first meeting recently with a limited staff team because we needed to get it going, but it's comprising members of the different teams, and also we are inviting tenant representatives onto the group to make sure that we have the full tenant perspective now. What we're considering is looking at how we categorise the severity of individual issues so that we respond appropriately, because some people might call when they have small amounts of mould without spores that are just the product of condensation and can be easily wiped, and it's not an ongoing problem. In some properties there is a bigger issue that might be caused by a repair being needed or by bigger investment works being needed as something structural that needs a bigger response. So what we want to look at doing is categorising where are we in this, and responding at an appropriate level of speed to each level of problem. One of the positive things that we have started doing is we have invested in some remote monitoring equipment, which a number of councils are using now, and we've got it installed in our first property. It's equipment that you can move between properties according to need, and it's monitoring equipment that gives information in real time once it's bedded in about temperature levels in different parts of the home, humidity levels in different parts of the home, ventilation levels. And once it's set up and calibrated and has been running for a while enough to get valid readings, it can provide for both the council and for the tenant real-time information on what is happening in the home and what can be done in order to adjust any readings that are out of parameters that we would like. So say, well, the temperature in this room is below what you need in order to prevent condensation. So if you turn the heating up in that room, it will make a difference. You know, the kitchen might be full of steam because you've been cooking. So if you open the window, that could make a difference. And we're hoping that this information will help tenants to have confidence that, you know, this is electronic equipment. It's not the council coming on and saying you haven't got a problem when you think there is. It's, you know, it's dispassionate, and it is providing an individual reading, and that gives us clues about, is there things that we can do, and it gives tenants advice. So as I say, we've got it in our first property at the moment, but I hope this is the first of many examples when we'll be able to use it and take those things forward, because obviously we want to respond to people's concerns and make sure that they are healthy and comfortable in their homes.
I went to visit a tenant today who has mould in 2 bedrooms. The problem is they're on a prepaid meter and they can't afford to put the heating on. Now this is a problem. They said that someone from the council had been out to see them. Now I'm wondering, do our repair teams got the knowledge to signpost people where they may get help because they can't afford to put the heating on? Because I think it needs doing, because the problem with it, if you leave it, it's going to cause damage to the plaster, and that will be a repair bill that the council will have to foot. So I wonder whether we could be proactive and try and signpost these people where they can get help.
Yes, we do try and signpost. The the repairs operatives will have some basic information, but if they have concerns about a tenant, they will report back to the housing officer team, and the housing officer team can do more detailed signposting. We have given out, for example, food vouchers, which means that people can, have a voucher for their food and use some of their other money for a fuel bill. But the dilemma of prepayment meters and the impossibility of affording them it's heartbreaking, and that's not within our remit to solve. That is a national problem. But yes, we would certainly want to be giving people advice and assistance. And there is quite a lot of information on the website, on the council's website, about cost of living crisis and where people can go, so people can look at that. But also, any staff who are visiting people's homes will be looking out to see what they can do to assist.
Do we actually do an analysis? Because it has gone up now, Damping Mold, because of the problem that was in with the child that died. But do we have an analysis of just how many properties that we have this problem with because of lack of heating?
Not in detail. We won't necessarily know if a tenant has a prepayment meter. We will know if that's been, well, at the beginning of a tenancy, that somebody would sign up with a supplier. One of the issues with smart meters that we're all being encouraged to have is that they allow your supplier to switch you to a remote prepayment without your consent, and in some cases even knowledge, and the council would have no knowledge of that. What we did do before Christmas was we had records where we'd had to cap gas because we hadn't been able to get access to do safety checks, and as a last resort you have to cut off the gas because of the risk to the tenant and their neighbours. We did run a list of everybody we had on our records being capped, and went and visited them all to do exactly that, welfare checks. And the good news was that quite a few people were no longer capped and had been sorted out, so we updated the records. But yes, we have been looking at those sort of things. And with the work that the housing officers are doing out in the communities and in their local hubs, those hubs are quite often warm spaces, aren't they? And the council has been advertising warm spaces that people can go and get a free hot drink, and it doesn't help with heating and mold in their own home, but at least it means that people's health is supported by having a portion of time. But it is very difficult times for a lot of people at the moment.
Really good question, Colin. Thank you for that. Yeah, excellent. I had no idea that damp and mold developed under 18 degrees a year. I mean, before Christmas, my home was much less than 18 degrees, and for the first time in a long time, I've got damp and mold in places where I'd never expected to have it. So I think it's another perfect storm in a way, isn't it?
It is. It is very.
Paula.
Yeah, this is very informative. What I was wondering, when you're looking at severe cases of damp and mold, and there will be some which are structural, do you take into account the household in your analysis in terms of which you would approach first? So if, for example, somebody had young children or a quite serious health condition, perhaps COPD or severe asthma, is that taken into account at all?
Very much so, yes. Yes, that is definitely part of the priority of the health and vulnerabilities of the individuals in the household.
Thank you. I would just like to point out that in Dursley there has been lots of mold and damp issues since I moved there in 1993. It's all mostly in the flats, but some of the houses. It's an ongoing issue. It's been there a long time, some worse than others, some to do with lifestyle, some not. But it's not something that we can blame on the current economic situation, because it's been there for as long as I've been there.
I agree. I think that the current dilemma, though, is that normally people are able to afford enough heating to reduce or eliminate the risk of condensation. At the moment, that is more of a problem.
Just say I went to visit a property a few years ago, and I've been to visit lots of these properties with mold because we have a lot of them. And this particular one, we've got a young baby, we've got small children. They opened the front door and they went, hot air hit me like a slap in the face. Would you like to come in? They said, no, you're okay, I've got to go. I'll chat to you out here. The tumble dryer was going, Lord knows what else was going. This was an upstairs flat where the windows could have been in ground floor flats. They can't go out and leave the windows open. But they have, I can't remember what they're called. Positive air input, something or other. I know they've been very, very successful with some of the ground floor flats I've seen because I can see through the windows where I couldn't. So I just wondered maybe we should make more use of those.
Absolutely, we are. Ventilation is a key part of combating damp and mould. Unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of instances where tenants have the PIVs and they are blocking them or switching them off because they run on electricity and they're worried about their fuel bills. And that is a real dilemma when somebody says, well, I've got this problem, but I don't want to ventilate and I don't want to heat. And you can completely understand their situation, but it does rather hamstring us in that, you know, we can do all the repairs in the world, but if the temperature is below the dew point, it's going to cause problems. So yeah.
Thank you. Sorry if this might take a while. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. I just wanted to go back to something that our chair said, you know, that this is a process that was started a number of years ago. I just wondered, what is a reasonable time to expect any damp and mold issues to be resolved, or as resolved as they could be?
I think that's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question, because it depends on the severity of the issue and on the vulnerability of the members of the household, and that's an equation that will be different in every home. We do see examples where there's barely visible mold and tenants are really exercised about it and think that it's immediately risking their health, and their distress may be genuine, but it may not be justified. And you know, that might be a conversation we would need to have. That, and that I referred earlier to looking at categorizing levels of damp and mold and making it clear what response we can make to each level, and that's one way we're going to be looking at it. But it is along the lines of, you know, where it gets injurious to health is where there's black mold spores, and so if that's present, then we would be making a quicker response than if it's something that is easily wiped with a bleach or an antifungal spray of some sort. And you know, I've certainly seen far more mold in my kitchen this last winter than I've seen in the time I've lived in my house, and that's from a combination of weather and me being mean with the heating because everybody's worried about their bills. So I think one of the problems is that when there's issues around condensation and other forms of damp, there can be multiple causes, and so it can take months or even years to find every single last thing. And we would start with the obvious, and sometimes that works and it's a one-off and wonderful, it's all done. We have cases where we go along, we do a thorough mold wash, we give some advice, we give leaflets, we explain to people what they need to do, and we never hear from them again. And that is wonderful, that's the ideal. Sometimes it works for a little bit and then something comes back, so we go back and have another look and see, is there something different we need to do? And the more things you eliminate, the fewer possibilities there are left. And it's a question of if it's safe for people to continue to live in the home, then we would expect that we should be putting it right so that they can continue to do so. If mould is at a level where it is injurious to health and there are people in the household who are vulnerable, then we will look at whether a priority move is justified. The dilemma there is always that, you know, you will be aware how tenants are very knowledgeable about other people on the transfer list, and the minute one person gets some additional priority, 20 others say, well, you moved that person, you need to move me. And it's trying to be fair and make sure that you're not allowing one person who is more vocal and more plugged into different communication channels to have their voice heard more than somebody who might be in a worse situation but sitting there quietly. It's the quiet ones who tend to be the ones that worry us the most. So there's always that dilemma of balancing a proportionate response, but our overwhelming priority is to make sure that people are safe. So if we feel that somebody's health is at risk, we will move very quickly to get them out.
On page 14, you say where it in the last paragraph where it says about the complaints relating to damp and mold, that there was 11 stage 1 complaints and 3, I'm assuming, is that meant to be stage 2? It just says stage complaints. So there was 3 stage 2 complaints. That was obviously between 1st of April 22 and obviously 19th of January 23. Do we have any figures for that for previous years so that we can make a comparison against?
Sorry. Yes, I can get those figures, and those complaints might not have been solely damp and mold. That would have been, you know, part of a complaint. 1 or 2 might have been solely, but it's interesting because our tenant satisfaction survey, which is the subject of a later briefing paper, I thought one of the things that interested me when I saw the report very recently was that obviously this was a sample of quite a large sample of our tenants, and only 4% of respondents to the survey, which equates to 9% of overall tenants, mentioned, when specifically asked, mentioned that damp and mold was an issue, which is quite, you know, when we're being bombarded with a lot of phone calls, it's easy to think, oh my gosh, everybody's in a really difficult position. But actually, it's making sure that we focus on those ones where it really is a problem.
And just obviously lastly, on page 13 in the middle, it says about the government has announced that it's reviewing the Decent Home Standards. Why? I mean, it seems as if we're just waiting for government legislation. Can we not kind of go that little bit above and beyond? You know, sometimes, why do we need to wait for legislation? Why can we not just be a good landlord and get these things sorted? I know that obviously the one that you said about previously, having the monitoring equipment, I believe might be in my own ward. I know that has been ongoing for quite some time. It just seems to be going back and forth so long now. I think we're into our 6th year. It just, to the people that are living this, it just seems to be going on too long. And I think we all would like to see a really good resolution to damp and mold. I know it's not as simple as that, but I think sometimes perhaps we're focusing a little bit too much on blaming tenants and saying it's your cooking, it's your having your tumble dryer on. You know, I mean, as Paula said, there will be some cases where they are structural, and we're now doing this monitoring thing. It just seems like another thing after another thing and after another thing, almost stalling to tenants that I've been involved with. So if things can get moved along a lot quicker, it would be more helpful. And if we can get more good news stories of saying, you know, actually we are being proactive and we are doing these things, you know, it actually looks better for the council as a whole.
Yes, there's a few points there for me to respond to. Firstly, we're not waiting for legislation, we are acting, but we will need to be mindful that that the government will be setting new standards that we will have to comply with. So we will be adjusting to that. The Ombudsman, the government, the regulator, senior managers here are clear that we do not blame tenants for damp and mould. There are things that tenants can do to help reduce the risk in terms of heating and ventilation, and we've discussed some of the dilemmas that tenants face there. But it is our responsibility to make sure that the repairs are done, that the home it meets proper standards, and that we advise tenants how they can minimise the risk of condensation, damp and mould. We do sometimes encounter situations. I mean, one of the classics is that if you dry your washing over the radiators, you are creating huge amounts. Some people do not want to listen to that message, but it's a fact.
Some people don't necessarily also have another choice.
Yeah, yes, but there are ways that you can minimise the risk of condensation from drying your washing, and it's our, you know, we would try to provide that advice, and then if people don't want to follow it, you know, that is their choice. But no, I appreciate that some cases take a long time to diagnose all the potential causes, and that is frustrating for tenants. And as I discussed earlier, there's that dilemma of, you know, trying to be fair to other people in similar situations who, you know, we're working with. We all want tenants to have a safe, warm, dry home. That's what we all want. But nobody should be blaming tenants for the state of their property. And well, it was suggested that staff were blaming. I mean, we have very occasionally seen cases where people have been deliberately doing things to make situations look worse than they are. That is always a very occasional thing, but those, you know, the vast majority of people are acting in good faith, and we treat them like that. But very often, damp and mould is not a quick fix.
Yeah, basically, I'm going back to what Lorraine was saying about Dursley. I actually live in one of those downstairs flats, and I had a lot of problems with damp and mold when I first moved in. And then the council put in one of those dry air things that brings air in from outside, which worked brilliantly till the contractors, when they did the installation, messed it up, and they're now waiting for a part to replace the bits that broke. But it's a very good way of dealing with things. I mean, that was done brilliantly, and it worked for years, but at the moment it's not working, so I'm starting to get damp now.
Yes, we have done a lot of work over the last, you know, however many years of increasing ventilation, because at the age of most of our council stock and many local authority stock, ventilation wasn't considered such an issue, mostly because people had really drafty windows and doors and drafts of ventilation. And it can be a dilemma that when you upgrade to you know, make the property really airtight, people then don't want to use the ventilation because they say, oh, this is nice. So that can be a problem. And of course, you know, we're all aware, particularly at this committee, of the work that we've been doing in order to retrofit homes and make them more energy efficient and improve affordability of heating. So that is an ongoing piece of work across the borough.
Yeah, I think it's also a question of money. It's a question of money for the tenants who possibly haven't had a salary increase or a salary increase at all that matches the rate of inflation, so the poorer. It's also the question of money for the council, who were only, and possibly rightly so, only allowed to increase our rents by 7%, and we than even that, while the costs have run by 11%. So everybody's caught in this. And what are we going to do with our older housing stock? Are we going to sell it off because we haven't got the money to make it into super deluxe housing stock? Or do we try and still provide the necessary housing as best as we can, even though it isn't perfect? There's a huge housing shortage. And if the government actually would allow us to build appropriately, then we wouldn't necessarily need to keep this old housing stock going for people who are in dire need. And so I feel we need to look at this as a whole thing, to say to the council, can't you improve this on our own? Where do we get the resources to actually do so? Is it by selling off partly? Is it by asking government for more money? We've been very creative, and you hear it every meeting again about the government making some funds available and straight away using that to do new things. We working with Warm and Well, the agencies to help people get the homes warmer. So I feel as a council, we're doing an enormous amount, and also in the community. But for me, it is a question in the end of the day, both for the tenants and the council, have we got enough money to do the right thing?
I'll let you come back, but there's other people wanted to talk, Lorraine.
It was just in response to Lucas, actually. I totally understand where you're coming from with the money side of things. But I think we also need to put it into perspective that, you know, we are spending in excess of £18 million to be retrofitting our homes. And, you know, that's all very well and good, but we need to have the basics right to start with in order for all of that work to be effective.
Lorraine.
I was hoping not to have to say a lot tonight, I really was. However, could we rewind a little bit? 11 complaints about mold and damp, is that right? Well, at least 4 of those are mine. So that means there's, what's 4 minus 11? Minus 4, sorry, my brain's got 7. Only 7 over the whole district, whatever. Just making that point. As far as what residents do and can do to help with the mould, I have residents who are keeping Domestos in profit. Lucas, we've just spent a fortune on re-insulating nearly all of the flats and some of the houses in my area. They still have damp issues. Our staff are very experienced. They've been doing this for years. So I would suggest that if our staff go and look at a property early, in the early stages, before it's dragged on, and look at it and think, this might be a problem a PIB could solve. We get one in without messing around, save an awful lot of money and effort and time for everybody. Thank you.
Yes, that is one of the things that our little working group is going to be looking at, is the responsibility of the different teams and coordinating that better, and having clear boundaries for when things move between teams, and B, a better resolution when there are always going to be some grey areas where it could be either or both, and we want to make sure that we address those issues that have cropped up before.
I just wanted to just add that as a tenant, I find that it's sometimes it's fighting a losing battle, because my windows are blown, so that means I've got condensation on the inside. They're not doing their job properly, but you know they're coming to replace it for a second time because it's blown for a second time. So they said, oh, you need new windows really, but they're not due to be replaced for another 10 years yet. So they expect them to last like 40 odd years for the double glazed units. So it's kind of, it's hard because windows are supposed to be, you know, that kind of how I'm always wiping my windows of condensation, but it doesn't help when things like the windows keep blowing. So as a tenant, it's really hard to keep on top of it because I've got mold coming in my bedroom just a little bit, and I keep on top of mine. So I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing because I have had the information pack, which was helpful. But it still hasn't stopped. Like at the front of the house, I'm constantly having to get the council to come out and do the gutters because there's moss on the roof, which then blocks up. Then the water pulls down the side of the house, which means the front is then done. So there are, you know, it's really hard as a tenant to keep on top of it all, just from a tenant's point of view.
No, I understand, Becky, and I'm sorry you've had that experience. What we're looking at with our review of procedures is identifying at what point we send out a surveyor to do a holistic look around the whole property rather than a spot diagnosis, because they're two different approaches, and you don't want to be overkill for a minor problem, but you don't want to be under responding. And in your case, you know, clearly we've had a component that wasn't up to scratch if you've had your windows replaced and it's blown again, and I will take that back and ask for somebody to come and see what we
it's fine. It's all being sorted. It's been done, but obviously I'm quite proactive and I've kept on top of everything. But it's it just seems like it's constant. I have to keep making appointments, and it's hard. It's hard, and some people don't have that ability to communicate to the council that this is happening because of this. And I know, and I can't get anyone to clear the moss off of my roof because I can't afford it. But the council say, well, we don't do that sort of thing. But that's what's causing, you know, I'm happy to keep ringing the council and they come and they clear the gutters, that's fine. Yeah. But it's just an ongoing cost to try and stop the condensation that I'm getting from the damp. And it's just like, it is like fighting a losing battle sometimes. But I'm happy with everything that's been done to rectify. It's just that it is like I said, fighting a losing battle sometimes.
Okay. Well, I will take your points back and see if there's anything more proactive we can do to deal with the moth on the roof that's causing a problem. I will make inquiries and we will get back to you.
Right, I think we'll move on. We've given that a very good airing, and I've learned a lot about damp and mould. Run around with a bleach bottle in my own home, I can assure you. Good airing, yes. I hope you've noticed. I was brought up in a really quite old cottage, which mercifully wasn't sealed because it was always freezing. I mean, in fact, the scullery, you could practically see the sky through it, you know, with a lean-to roof. So we never had any damp and mold, funnily enough, because nobody hung around very long. So sorry, I'm going to cough now. We're going to move on to number C on this, and Pippa has written us a paper about the housing enabling process, because it is hard to understand all we're doing and all we are facilitating happening in new homes. Vice Chair has also mentioned about the housing crisis, and we are doing quite a lot in Stroud to combat that. Well, we're doing our bit, I think it's fair to say. So over to you, Pippa, just to... Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably, this is one of these processes which has been in place for a long time, but probably is very much below the radar, I suppose, because it works generally. But it's a good time to be talking about this because the new Stroud local plan is moving towards examination in public this May. And the reason I mention that is because that's how where our policies will be embedded, and if we've got them right, our policies will give rise to new affordable homes through the planning process. So this paper is just to set out that the process, which starts with government policy, moves through our local policies and ends up with delivering of new homes that people in this district can live in. It's probably worth also touching on the definition of affordable housing, because it's something that kind of gets flung around a little, but I think it's worth noting that when somebody like me talks about affordable housing, we mean it as a noun, not a descriptor. So affordable housing in our world is a particular set of products. So we're talking about homes that are available at an affordable or social rent. We're talking about homes that are available for shared ownership, or homes occasionally, and we do try and avoid this one most of the time, homes that are available at a discounted rate. But the thing to note about affordable housing, the way we talk about it, is that it's locked in to be affordable in the longer term. So it's not about somebody getting a cheap house and then selling it at a profit, which is something that some people assume sometimes when they're talking about affordable homes. So just worth noting that affordable housing is a particular thing in planning, and that's the way we refer to it when we're talking about our new affordable homes programme. Probably the only other thing to say is that we rely very heavily on our housing association partners. On the development side, we have very good relationships with them. They do with us, and they regard us as a good partner to work with, particularly our planning department, who are really helpful and understand what we're trying to achieve with our policies. So they work very well with us. Thank you. I apologise for the length of the paper. I was aiming for a bit shorter, but it is quite a long process. So hopefully it makes sense, the paper that's set out in front of you tonight.
Very informative paper, and thank you for that. I hope you all feel informed about that. Any questions at all? Colin.
I see in the paper, Pippa, we talk about unviable or viable options. Just how much pressure is on us by developers to influence them? Because what worries me, if a developer comes along and says, well, sorry, that option's not viable, does that mean we drop it?
Thank you. Good question. If it's any comfort, it worries me too, Colin. No, we're a little bit more cynical than that, I'm pleased to say. So if a developer does try to make a viability case, they have to give us basically an open book process. Now, that's often information we can't put fully into the public domain because a lot of the calculations are commercially sensitive. But what we do is we submit those figures to the district valuer. Now, District Valuers Department is part of HMRC, so that it's not easy to pull the wool over their eyes, and they are very good at scrutinising viability information for us. So we don't take it at face value. We do make sure that what we're being told is in fact true, and that they have made a proper case before we agree to it. But any loss like that, I feel very personally, because I'm very proud of what we deliver. So we are very careful that we maximise all of the opportunities to deliver new affordable homes.
Thanks, Pippa. We never mentioned social housing in the affordable housing, which is something I always try to champion.
Absolutely, and so social housing is part of affordable housing. You can almost see the two terms as being interchangeable. However, because I operate largely in the planning world for that, affordable housing has a very definite definition in the planning world. But I think for these purposes, and particularly for this committee, we can view social housing and affordable housing as pretty much interchangeable, if you're happy that social housing would also include things like shared ownership properties.
I know it's not strictly Pippa's remit, but I get a little bit worried because every time we get new properties or we have new homes that we're developing, the only way they're viable is if we go to 80% affordable housing rather than social rents. And I understand that's the only way we're going to get them. But I always feel the more and more that is the only option. And when I say, well, what about if people can't afford those rents? I told, well, there's lots of others in the social one that they can go for. But as time goes by, more and more is going to be affordable rents rather than social rents. And do we ever worry about that the balance is going to get off kilter?
Yeah, I share your concerns, and it's true that the vast majority of new deliveries are affordable rents. If it's any comfort when we're dealing with new homes through the planning system, what we do is make sure that affordable rents are capped at local housing allowance levels. So that means a household who is benefit dependent would still be able to afford to live in one of these properties. So that's one of the safeguards we put in place. But ideally, yes, we would have more of a mix between social and affordable rent. The problem is it would often come down to a choice of, would we like fewer homes at a social rent or more homes at an affordable rent? That's what it really comes down to, because the costs are very different and the income back to the provider, be that a council or a housing association, are very different with those two types of rent.
You might get a family who are finding it hard to pay their rent, but they're not on benefits. There might be two people in a family of a partnership. They're both earning, but they're both earning not very much, but they're just above the benefit rate. And it seems like they're at a disadvantage sometimes.
I agree. I'm afraid I can give you no clever answer for that. I agree. I would personally like to see more social rent properties, and we may see a swing back to that in the future. But at this point in time, affordable rent is the way that most new affordable development is going.
That was good timing. I would just like to say how pleased I am that we are finally accepting the difference between social and affordable, which is something I've banged on about for a long time and often been shut down.
Nobody's ever shut me down on saying it, because I say it all the time. And I'm all for social rents as well. You know I am, but you know, sometimes there isn't a choice. When we've had grant aid from Homes England, for example, that's been the criteria. We've had to do it. I take a little bit of comfort that of the homes we're building are so energy efficient that people will have lower bills, which at the moment it's having a huge impact on people. So I take a little bit of comfort from that, but I share what you're saying. It's you know, if you're on benefits, that's fine, and you do get help. But it's there was the Conservative Prime Minister who had a word for this, wasn't it? Jam, you know, just about managing. And she was going to do lots about it, but I can't really remember anything being done. So you know, I'm not trying to say the poor will always be with us, but you know, this is where we are, isn't it? And it's things that people here on this committee have worked against all these years. So, and I think that's been cross-party.
That's what worries me, Chair, when we talk about viability. Because if we try and increase social housing, then all of a sudden it's not viable. And that's what worries me when we talk about viability.
We're going to move to, sorry.
I just would like to say that every year we are building more, or having available more affordable, possibly not all social houses. It's 245 homes in 21-22 against 219 in 2021, and lower still the years before. So I hope that's a trend that can continue.
I hope so too. I can't guarantee it because it depends. I mean, what's underpinning the very good figures recently is Great Albury, because sales have gone very well there. The developers are very confident they're building at a good rate, which means because our affordable homes are delivered in step with the market housing, that the affordable homes have been delivered at a good rate as well. So I'd like to see that kind of delivery in future. I can't guarantee it, but of course, with the new local plan coming into place, that will give us new opportunities for new supplies of affordable homes.
Great. Looking forward to it.
I think Great Oldbury is a good example, isn't it? And it is working quite well. I think we've learned from other big estates. You know, there's a school there, and there's quite a community coming along there, I understand. So we've learned a lot in doing that, not us personally, but this authority, I think. Okay. If there's no more questions for Pippa, I'm going to move on to Michelle. And do you want to stay there? Or? Yeah. Michelle's going to do progress report on key action plans, cleaner estates, and tenant engagement. She's going to give us. She's giving us a little report, but you're going to talk it through, aren't you?
So cleaner estates is short and sweet this time. So you will be aware we've had a pilot working with our fabulous site officers who've been doing some collecting of our fly tipping around the district, and that's been working really well. The site officers collect around the district every Tuesday, so they're out in their truck and they go around the district. We give them a list of everything we are made aware of, but they also pick up anything that they see en route. So it's sort of starting to make a real difference to our estates. So they do regular skip changes at Acacia Drive and Welling Close. And obviously we've got to pay for the skips and we've got to pay for the officers' time. But so far in the last 3 months, we've made a saving of about £4,000, which is more than we expected. However, we do know that the costs of the officers' time might not be correct at the moment. So we are working through a service level agreement with them, and we're working with Pascal, who's doing our service charge depooling, to make sure that the costs that we're being charged from the site officers are correct. So those costs may increase, but whatever, it is starting to show a considerable saving, and we're getting real data of what is being collected, which is really good, because sometimes there's been some issues over we've asked for things to be collected and then we've been told they're still there, and then we've been told no, that wasn't there, we did collect. So with the site officers, they're actually giving us a list of what they did collect when they've collected it. So we've got some real data knowing that what was there on the day we reported it was collected the following Tuesday. So that's going really well, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of feedback on that in the next few months as to how we're increasing that. Site officers are a really great team who want to do more work that they can around the district with us. So we're really utilising their skills to work with us. We've also, we've just put together an action plan for some work on Chapel Street. So we are looking at refuse there and looking how we can change the refuse collection points. So we're doing some work with Ubico on that. So that might take a little bit of time to implement, because we will need to do some tenant consultation as well. But that should sort of start to unfold within the next sort of 6 months. So that's cleaner estates. Any questions? Yeah. So tenant engagement. As you're aware, some of our tenants have held their first scrutiny panel, which has gone down really well, and it's really great. Over the Christmas period, we always send out gifts to our involved tenants just to say thank you for the work over the year. And a couple of our tenants who were or living in our independent living units have come back to us to say they went to share the biscuits they'd had in the independent living units in the coffee morning, and they shared with them the results of the scrutiny group, which was really good to know that information has been shared, through other people that haven't been involved. So that's been a really good feedback that's come back to us. We've also got 3 or 4 tenants who've signed up to TPAS, which is a Tenants Participation Advisory Panel. So they've signed up to join the conferences and podcasts online, and they've had some really good feedback from that. They've started to learn quite a lot. And the people that attend those conferences and online podcasts are very much tenants from local authorities and housing associations across the country. So they're mixing with other people and having some, really good debates about different issues that are affecting all of us. So we've had some really good feedback about that they've really enjoyed it. And one tenant said that, Michelle, the one thing I've learned from it is that we're a really good landlord. You're a really good landlord at Stroud District Council. So that was really nice to hear. You'll remember that I did talk about the satisfaction surveys being sent out in September and October. We've just had the data back for general needs at the moment, and we're waiting for the independent living results to come back. So I will be feeding back on the entire results at a future housing committee. So the survey was incentivised with a free prize draw, so we could try and draw in as many people as we could. So in total, there were 794 responses for the general needs survey, which represented a response rate of about 40%. So we knew post-pandemic that there's been a fall in satisfaction across the housing sector. And we knew that satisfaction for Stroud would have fallen in line with that. So we know that satisfaction has fallen to about 70% compared to the 2019 survey, which was at 81%. So we know we've got quite a bit of work to do as we enter into this year. The strongest factors that predict tenant satisfaction are repairs and maintenance, listening and acting on tenants' views, quality of the home, treated fairly and with respect, and safety and security of the home. So those are the areas we know that we need to be working on throughout this year to improve satisfaction and the experience for our tenants. So from comments cited, we know that a lot of the issues are to do with repairs and maintenance. We know that a lot of it's to do with long-standing and incomplete work, which is, again, has been a direct impact from the pandemic. And we know that that satisfaction has fallen in line with most other landlords. And again, one of the most commonly mentioned property issues is damp and mold and condensation. So we know we're en route with that. We're updating the policy, and we're looking at what we can do to make things better there. Tenants in shared communal areas are concerned about communal cleaning, and that has fallen in satisfaction. Currently, only half of our flats are cleaned by our contractor, so that's something we will be reviewing as we go through the depuling project along with the service standards. So that's something we will consult with tenants over. One of the most frequent comments about customer service experience is not managing to get hold of the right person. 7 out of 10 are saying that staff were helpful, but some felt that their query wasn't dealt with because they couldn't speak to the right person. So we need to sort of delve more into that to see what that's telling us and what we can do to change that. Fewer tenants commented about the safety or security issues, although we know some people have raised some issues about antisocial behaviour. So we're going to be looking at, hopefully when we get the full data, we'll have some names and addresses so we can talk to people about that experience. As we know that our work with antisocial behaviour and with the police has really increased in the last 18 months, and we've received good comments back from our partners. So we do need to understand where those issues are still concerning people. The good news is that 1 in 10 tenants wish to compliment the council on the services they received, and this was generally from people who were happy in their home and were impressed with the standard of service they'd received. And some of the comments were, the maintenance has been carried out really well, and I was really pleased and thanked the council for their support. I love living here and I get a really good service. When I speak to repairs, they're really helpful and understanding and do their utmost to sort things. Workmen are very polite and repairs are done to a high standard. So we know we've got room for improvement. We know that we've gone down in satisfaction rates, but we also know there are people out there that are getting a good service. So we just need to try and correlate where it's going wrong for some people and where it's going right for others, and sort of improve on that. So moving forward, we are looking at ways as to how we can improve the service and improve tenant satisfaction. So we're looking at all the teams across landlord services and looking at how we improve efficiencies. We are arranging cafe conversations throughout this year to engage with tenants and to understand their needs and the changes they'd like to see. So when we have tenant events, we tend to generally get good feedback from those events. So it's understanding why we get one set of feedback when we see people in person, a different set of feedback from surveys. So that's something we need to work on. We're working really well with the community hubs, and we're obviously establishing the ABCD approach, and we're in the early infancy of that, but that's something we're hoping will improve the service as we go forward this year. We've got housing hubs in some areas of the district to encourage more tenant interaction with housing officers. And we know there are plenty of areas that would like to have a housing hub with a housing officer out on their district or their patch, and more easily accessible. So that is something we are working on, trying to sort of divvy up the time they've got to be in the office for administration works and how often they can be out on their patch. We'll continue to do additional work with our tenant scrutiny group, and hopefully through their input we'll be able to improve satisfaction. And as Helen's already said, we've set up a damp and mould focus group so that we can identify the areas there and address the damp and mould issues, and we will be bringing tenants into that group as well, to give us their view. So although the results aren't what we would have liked, they are what we sort of expected, because we'd been warned by the research group that across the housing sector results had gone down. But we do have a plan in place, and we are hopeful that by the time we do the next survey, things will have improved.
Thank you, Michelle. You've lightened the mood tonight, I have to say, for me anyway. Any questions from Michelle? Chris.
Michelle, thanks very much for that. All really comprehensive. Your positivity is infectious. I'm sure that's everywhere. Am I right in thinking that what you spoke to was the preliminary results plus the kind of free text bits, so people's commentaries rather than really liked, really disagree kind of things? Is that correct? Sorry. And
yes,
then,
we'll have more when I present the full report. You'll be able to see it in detail.
Okay. That's what I wasn't. I thought I'd kind of maybe had micro sleep and missed the kind of the percentages and so on. And my other question is what's the sort of what's the kind of theoretical basis of the survey? How do we formulate our questions, and how do we set out the options? Do we draw on any particular kind of reference or?
So the questions are based. The methodology is based around what the regulator wants to know. So that's what we base the questions around, and those will change as we go forward. The regulator is putting out the satisfaction measures they're looking at. So that's what the methodology is based on.
Sorry, I haven't talked for so long, have I? Item B on this is tenant representative. I don't know if you want to give any sort of report or talk to us about anything.
Basically,
like
just very quickly, since the last housing committee meeting, we've had Christmas in the way, haven't we? So we've been sort of inundated with that and various other things. One of the things I did notice, and it's a little bugbear, that we had a lot of installation work done in Dursley. And one of the things, I found an old letter from the council which said, oh, the insulation work will be done and any cabling and things will be replaced and put back. But when you look at some of the flats around there, all the cables are still hanging off. There's sky bits hanging off. None of it's been done. I just wonder what actually gets done to sign off the contractors, because they seem to be quite slapdash.
Over the last year, we have had an enormous amount of turnover and turmoil within the asset management team. We had a lot of people leave and some temporary people, so some things did get dropped between different stalls. If you give me or Michelle addresses where there is an issue, we will go back and do that. We've had a few cases where we've had to go back and get contractors to go back. So yes, sadly, we did experience some problems, but we are doing everything we can to keep the team stable and make sure that we don't repeat those issues.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. So the next item is the work programme. And as you can see, I've already alluded to it, March meeting is going to be pretty busy. We've got, as I say, we've got two things that have been moved on there. Future meetings, tenancy agreement, part of the de-pooling project. And I think Sarah Weaver is currently working on a paper about de-pooling, isn't she? So yeah, that should be with us all quite shortly, next week, I hope, or something like that. The new homes update on the site at Orchard Road, which I know Jenny would be pleased about, to have a bit more information. And that's it really. So unless you've got a comment on this.
Just a question. I get asked a lot about the ship site in Stonehouse. Is that one of the things that's going to be looked at in the next meeting?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, Mike. If you give me the details of what you want to know, I'll see if I can find out.
It was something that Nick used to talk a lot about, and because we run the shop in Stonehouse, another bookshop, we get loads of people saying, what's happening about that site because it's by the canal, and you know, they keep asking me things, and I said, well, I haven't got a clue.
I know we were talking to the town council about it, so I'll come back to you on that, Mike. Thank you.
Can I just, I think it was said that I think the chair was bringing a report back in, I want to say Easter for some reason, but it's going to be March, isn't it? Yeah, spring.
Yeah.
So March, yeah.
So I think we've come to the end, and thank you all very much. I think we've had a good and open discussion tonight about everything, and thank you for coming, and go home safely. I think it's cold